On Krieg's mustering fields, the air hangs thick with ozone and ash. Endless columns of Death Corps regiments move past rusting saints and floodlights, their collective voice rising in the guttural cadence of the litany of sacrifice. Each step scours chalk from parade soil. Each verse erases a name. Behind portable barriers, Departamento Munitorum clerks hunch over data slates, tallying acceptable losses before the regiments board their transports. Numbers become futures. Statistics become graves. Among the ranks, one image crystallizes the machine's logic. A child's gas mask, scarred by use, bearing 17 purity seals across its filter dome. The breathing apparatus has been modified. Prayer beads threaded through the intake valve click with each inhalation, a rosary counter for confirmed kills. With every forced breath, faith advances. With every death delivered, another seal joins the collection. Here, the equation reveals itself plainly. Faith is logistics language. Fanaticism is inventory management. This raises the central question. Why do imperial institutions systematically prefer armies that embrace death over those that seek survival? The answer lies in the intersection of four great ministries, each treating devotion as measurable output. The Departamento Munitorum quantifies spiritual fervor through supply allocation formulas. The Adeptus Ministorum converts grief into tactical doctrine, translating requisitions into litanies and audits into shriving. The Officio Prefectus measures loyalty through execution quotas, their red sashes movable columns in ledgers of fear. The Schola Progenium refines orphans into compliance, treating zeal as throughput in vast conditioning facilities. Watch the sanctification protocols function. A senior scribe stamps ammunition crates with ecclesiarchal seals. Their status changes from cargo to reliquary, and checkpoint delays vanish. Blessed munitions move in minutes, while unblessed shipments wait days for inspection. Blessing becomes priority code. Chaplains understand this arithmetic. So do quartermasters. The language of devotion and the grammar of deficit share administrative space. Confessors conduct penance drills while logisticians conduct variance analysis. Both mark time with brass clickers. When regiments arrive under quota, sermons expand to fill gaps. More oaths, more banners, more names for the same trenches. Whispered references circulate through Munitorum channels. Memorandum Hereticus 847 Zeal, authorizing faith-based conscription quotas for governors struggling to meet imperial tithes. No one admits to reading the text. Everyone follows its implications. A clerk slides deployment schedules across the desk. Columns list origin hives, devotional ratings, casualty forecasts, resupply cadence. At the bottom, notation written small. Deployment priority amended per sanctification order. The system speaks in its true voice. Across the yard, the child claims her mask from its peg. The prayer beads click 17 times. In Munitorum archives, her death exists as calculation, category, sanctified acceptable loss. Her regiment ships to Vrax Prime within the month. 17 years of siege, 14 million imperial dead, one fortress reclaimed. The mathematics are precise. The faith is genuine. The machine endures through both. What memorandum converts pilgrims into regiments through bureaucratic alchemy? Sanctification protocols? Divine blessing? Or administrative shortcut? The institutional trauma that defines imperial military doctrine traces to a single operational failure during the Horus Heresy. Post-battle analysis revealed a pattern that would reshape 10 millennia of warfare. Chaos forces with inferior equipment consistently outfought loyalist armies through psychological warfare. At Istvan V, veteran companies with centuries of combat experience broke ranks when confronted with former battle brothers bearing traitor colours. On Terra itself, elite solar auxilia regiments hesitated at crucial moments, paralysed by recognition beneath corrupted helms. Doubt slowed trigger fingers. Moral complexity jammed lasguns. Fear proved more lethal than bolter rounds. Units that paused to ask why found themselves outflanked by those that refused to ask at all. The Loyalists possessed superior numbers, equipment, and tactical doctrine. They lost because they retained the capacity for moral uncertainty. Traitor forces suffered no such weakness. Their corruption provided immunity to doubt through the simple expedient of eliminating conscience entirely. Cultist hordes charged fortified positions because the concept of self-preservation had been systematically excised from their psychology. The lesson crystallized in blood. Fanatical devotion provides immunity to corruption where training fails. Early post-heresy reforms prioritized spiritual resilience over tactical competence, establishing doctrinal foundations that would endure for millennia. The Imperium took treachery's lesson and inverted it. Weaponize loyalty before the enemy weaponizes doubt. Training syllabi cut fieldcraft hours to expand catechism drills. Officers learned to read hearts faster than maps. The creed did what armor could not. It sealed the seam of hesitation. Metrics followed necessity. Commanders needed methods to predict who would stand when the warp pressed against human minds. The Officio Prefectus introduced the loyalty gradient, a 9-step index of reliability under ideological stress. Units graded L7 and above received fewer overseers and more ammunition. L3 units received additional sermons and spare firing squads. Munitorum tacticians folded belief into attrition models as faith coefficients. Numerical adjusters applied to expected casualty tolerance and susceptibility to panic contagion. A regiment singing on the march could be modeled to hold trenches 72 minutes longer at ammunition deficit. The numbers were ugly, but consistent. Devotion became a multiplier. Faith became tactical parameter. This bureaucratic alchemy required standardization. Individual soldiers arrived with unpredictable loyalties shaped by planetary culture and personal experience. The Imperium needed institutional mechanisms to produce reliable devotion at industrial scale. The Schola Progenium emerged as the primary solution, war orphans providing ideal raw material for systematic conditioning. By the Scouring's close, desperate wartime expedient had ossified into peacetime operating procedure. Manuals spoke in absolutes because absolutes were easier to audit. The preference for soldiers who sought death over those who sought survival was no longer moral theatre, but risk management backed by statistics and scripture. The machinery operates through precise institutional coordination between Schola facilities, Munitorum logistics, ecclesiarchy doctrine, and commissaria oversight. 10,000 years of refinement have perfected the system that transforms individual trauma into collective fanaticism through controlled application of grief, scarcity, and ritual indoctrination. How did desperate wartime expedients become permanent institutional doctrine? What machinery transforms individual trauma into collective fanaticism? The Schola Progenium facility on Ophelia 7 processes grief with industrial precision. Corridors smell of lye soap and regulation gruel, their walls marked with chalk lines that train feet to march in formation even during sleep. War orphans arrive by transport in lots of 144. Children whose parents died serving the throne, their trauma raw material for systematic conditioning. Breaking points are mapped through clinical observation. New arrivals surrender personal effects to instructors who catalogue each item before consigning them to furnace flames. Measurable psychological thresholds emerge through controlled deprivation. Day 19. Tears cease during evening prayers. Day 31. Subjects stop turning toward footsteps that match parental cadence. Day 47. Hesitation eliminated during loyalty assessments. Each milestone is logged, tracked, and replicated across cohorts. Catechism drills synchronize doctrine to autonomic function. Children recite while breathing in measured rhythm. Faith measures the distance between breath and duty. Inhale doctrine, exhale doubt. After 18 months of synchronized recitation, the phrases trigger automatically under stress. overriding fear responses with liturgical programming. Medici psychers monitor cortisol levels and pupil dilation, adjusting conditioning intensity based on neurochemical feedback. Undaunted Effect scores quantify devotional reliability through standardized assessments. Children who display appropriate emotional numbness during execution demonstrations receive ratings above 8.0 and enhanced meal portions. Those who flinch or weep undergo corrective conditioning, extended isolation combined with curated martyrology until grief transforms into weaponized devotion. The archives contain 10,000 saint stories, each calibrated to specific psychological profiles. Artificial scarcity writes zeal into reflex. Hunger becomes teacher. Cold becomes constant companion. Every need met is framed as imperial blessing. Every deprivation tests faith. Children learn that questioning doctrine triggers hunger, that displaying emotion invites punishment, that absolute compliance provides the only survival path. By graduation, independent thought has been surgically excised through repetition and reinforcement. 3 graduates exemplify systematic output. Commissar Probator Thane emerges from command track conditioning. His empathy replaced by tactical calculation and unwavering regulatory adherence. His undaunted affect score, 8.9. Sister Novice Seraphina follows ecclesiarchy specialization, her maternal instincts redirected towards spiritual guidance through violence and absolution. Score, 8.2. Munitorum. Adept Vex represents administrative excellence, childhood curiosity transformed into obsessive attention to supply chain efficiency and quota fulfillment. Score, 7.0. Statistically loyal but intellectually aware. The facility's dual nature reveals itself through shared administrative infrastructure. Bureaucracy and liturgy operate through identical sanctification seals, making religious observance indistinguishable from administrative compliance. Prayer schedules match duty rosters. Confession booths serve as performance evaluation chambers. Salvation becomes measurable output tracked through quarterly reports. The chapel's reliquary bears the same stamp that validates requisition forms, both marked sanctified for purpose. Graduation ceremonies blend sacrament with personnel transfer. Children receive assignments coded as divine calling, while signing transport requisitions in triplicate. Their conditioning ensures they experience no contradiction between spiritual devotion and bureaucratic function. Faith and logistics speak identical language because the scholar taught both as single vocabulary. Output standardization matches munitions production. Cohorts graduate in regulation lots, sealed by sigils that clear freight through starport customs. Each carries conditioning packets, levy catechism, hymnal frequencies, ration sacrament protocol. Planetary governors receive these kits and implement them as devotional programming, scaling individual trauma into collective fanaticism through systematic replication. What happens to scholar graduates who retain dangerous levels of independent thought? How do these techniques scale from individual conditioning to planetary conscription? The Adeptus Ministerum's doctrinal architecture operates as dual-purpose machinery. Spiritual framework and operational protocol fuse through administrative necessity. The Imperial Creed functions not merely as theology, but as an operating system, each article defining permissible behaviors, while every sin maps to corrective processes. Confessors attached to frontline regiments carry data slates alongside prayer books, their duties encompassing salvation and statistics in equal measure. These battlefield chaplains perform synchronized functions that reveal the system's true nature. They convert paralyzing fear into usable rage through systematic liturgical conditioning, timing-guided litanies to heartbeat rhythms that override panic responses. Simultaneously, they provide legal justification for summary executions through ritual recitation. The ninefold absolution, voiced before witnesses, transforms murder into sanctioned purification. Heresy charges require paperwork. Absolution provides it in triplicate. Faith multipliers represent the Munitorum's most sophisticated innovation, statistical models that assign numerical values to religious fervor, calculating tactical advantages with actuarial precision. Zealot units sustain combat effectiveness 23% longer under ammunition rationing compared to conventional forces. They advance into kill zones that would break professional soldiers, their conditioning overriding survival instincts through programmed devotional responses. Quartermasters factor these multipliers into supply allocation, deliberately starving fanatic regiments because scarcity enhances battlefield performance. The partnership mechanics reveal institutional symbiosis, perfected through necessity. The ecclesiarchy provides the grammar of sacrifice, liturgical frameworks that transform individual death into collective meaning through ritual narrative. The Munitorum provides the quotas of bodies and shells, calculating how many martyrs achieve specific tactical objectives within acceptable resource expenditure. Orders are issued as prayers to simplify enforcement. Disobeying plans becomes committing sins. Sanctification protocols complete the administrative circuit. These are not divine blessings, but logistical workarounds disguised as sacred ritual. Only blessed munitions cross diocesan boundaries without audit delays, their holy status exempting them from standard bureaucratic review. Ecclesiarchy stamps bypass customs inspection. Purity seals accelerate shipping manifests. The system converts religious observance into supply chain efficiency through shared certification infrastructure. Regional confessors coordinate with Munitorum logistics officers, synchronizing sermon content to material availability. When ammunition runs low, homilies emphasize martyrdom through melee combat. When rations decrease, liturgies celebrate fasting as spiritual purification. Doctrine adapts to constraints while presenting adaptation as divine revelation. In a forward supply depot, the lesson becomes tactile. Quartermaster Major Helix examines ammunition crates awaiting transport, data slate in one hand, Aquila seal in the other. Standard protocol requires confessor blessing for priority shipment, but only 12 of 48 crates can receive sanctification before morning assault. His selection determines which companies receive adequate supplies for tomorrow's offensive, effectively deciding survival through administrative theology. The crates bear identical contents, standard issue last charges from the same assembly line. Blessing changes nothing except shipping priority, but that difference measures life in minutes and death in meters. This is doctrine as control surface, levers labeled virtue, toggles named sacrament. How do planetary governors implement these doctrines during mass conscription? What transforms individual conditioning into regimental scale fanaticism? Planetary governors meet imperial tithes through systematic demographic harvesting, targeting populations whose removal solves multiple administrative problems simultaneously. Memorandum. Hereticus 847. Zeal provides the legal framework, authorizing faith-based conscription quotas that convert social volatility into military assets. Pilgrim districts offer ideal recruitment pools, transient populations with pre-existing devotional conditioning and minimal political connections. Debtor blocks provide secondary sources where economic failure has already marked citizens for state intervention. Redemptionist congregations volunteer themselves, their theology demanding martyrdom while eliminating training costs. Inside conscription center Tertius, the conversion process operates with industrial efficiency. Penitents queue beneath Gothic arches, exchanging indulgence tokens earned through public contrition for ration chits, then trading accumulated chits for lasguns and transport vouchers. The economy of salvation becomes literal transaction, sin measured in scrip, absolution purchased through service, redemption calculated in projected casualty rates. Training schedules compressed to meet shipping deadlines imposed by warp transit windows and campaign timetables. Doctrine becomes songs and slogans memorized between meals. Complex tactical instruction reduced to rhythmic chants, synchronized to marching cadence. Faith measures the distance between breath and duty, replaces weapons maintenance training. Soldiers learn to die before they learn to fight. Fanaticism prioritized over proficiency because devotion takes weeks, while competence requires months. Food serves as primary behavioral modification mechanism throughout the process. Faith rations, portions marked with aquila seals, reward attendance at mandatory rites and enthusiastic participation in devotional exercises. Starvation punishes doctrinal lapses, questioning authority, or displaying excessive attachment to survival. Medicae monitor weight changes, using hunger as instructor more effective than reprimand. Bodies learn compliance through controlled deprivation. Munitorum. Adept Vex processes levy paperwork with mechanical precision, her scholar conditioning, enabling calculation of human cost without emotional interference. Each form represents statistical probability. Deployment location correlates to survival odds. Unit designation predicts death timeline. Mission classification forecasts casualty percentage. The destination field is already filled for half the consignments. VRACs. Later, these same documents will invert from levy sheets into casualty abstracts, names becoming numbers beneath acceptable loss calculations. The fanatic profile proves irresistibly attractive to governors struggling with multiple challenges. Zealot conscripts are politically reliable, their conditioning eliminating potential for organized resistance. They are logistically cheap, requiring minimal equipment and support infrastructure. Most importantly, conscription removes volatile populations from hive cities, solving urban overcrowding through systematic export of social instability. The process culminates in ritual scarification administered by ecclesiarchy personnel using sanctified branding irons. Each mark serves dual function: transportation pass clearing planetary customs, and death sentence disguised as absolution. Sacred symbols encode shipping manifests. Religious iconography becomes inventory management. The brands identify conscripts as imperial property, while marking them for expenditure in combat operations. Vex stamps the final transport authorization, her stylus scratching across parchment that will outlive most of its subjects. If governors export social volatility, what returns after the war ends? How do field commanders maintain fanatical conditioning under combat stress? The Vox networks hum with constant hymnal traffic, tactical commands embedded within liturgical transmission. Company frequencies carry the canticle of onset in alternating verses, synchronizing squad movements through devotional rhythm. Artillery channels receive separate hymnal codes. Tempo shifts, signal range adjustments, harmonic changes indicate target priority. When the sacred music breaks, someone has died or refused orders. Both require identical correction. Regimental banners function as visual control surfaces, their religious iconography encoding tactical directives readable only by initiated officers. Crossed aquilus indicate defensive positions. Bleeding suns command advance under fire. Skull and torch symbols demand purification by flame. Banner bearers learn to maintain steady display under enemy fire. Trembling standards transmit panic across formations. Sacred cloth becomes tactical keyboard. Devotion becomes operational protocol. Commissar Probator Thane walks the trench lines, silently rehearsing scholar conditioning. Faith measures the distance between breath and duty. His breathing synchronizes to Vox hymnal cadence while he reviews execution quotas and loyalty assessments. Sister Novice Seraphina, attached to the adjacent Penal Legion battalion, computes penance quotas using algorithms that balance spiritual correction with tactical requirements. Her data slate tracks confession frequency, prayer attendance, and devotional enthusiasm through metrics derived from ecclesiarchy doctrine and munitorum efficiency standards. Internal enforcement exacts measurable costs. In extended campaigns, disciplinary actions account for 1 in 18 imperial casualties, commissariat executions, ecclesiarchy purifications, and correctional violence consuming military strength through systematic elimination of perceived dissent. These losses are classified as spiritual maintenance rather than friendly fire, their necessity justified through faith-based risk assessment models that treat doubt as tactical liability. Contagion protocols isolate dissent through strategic assignment rather than immediate execution. Soldiers identified as complaint vectors receive point positions in assault waves, their deaths serving dual purpose, eliminating troublemakers while demonstrating consequences to survivors. The loudest voices disappear into forlorn hope detachments, their martyrdom purifying unit morale while removing ideological contamination. Survival, when it occurs, validates zeal as cure for disorder. A shadow economy corrupts the system through commodified salvation. Confessors trade indulgence certificates for relics, favors, and contraband luxuries, their spiritual authority converted into negotiable currency. Squads with cooperative priests fight on fuller bellies and lighter consciences. Battlefield trophies purchase reduced penance. Sacred relics buy forgiveness for tactical failures. Zeal becomes commodity. Devotion becomes transaction. Corruption follows value through channels designed for purity. Authority overlaps, generate inevitable friction between competing institutional mandates. Seraphina's sororitas protocols demand immediate purification of heretical thoughts, while Thane's commissariat procedures require formal charges before disciplinary action. During recent operations, jurisdictional disputes consumed command attention as both claimed precedence over identical tactical decisions. When a sergeant hesitated to abandon wounded soldiers, competing codes collided. They compromised. Public penance immediately. Execution postponed until next dusk if quotas slipped. The control mechanisms function through mutual surveillance disguised as spiritual guidance. Commissars monitor confessors. Confessors evaluate commissars. Both report to distant authorities who never witness frontline reality. Trust becomes impossible. Paranoia becomes operational necessity. The system designed to ensure loyalty creates conditions where loyalty cannot exist. When command structures fracture under pressure, who shoots first? How do these control systems perform against enemies that exploit fanatical predictability? Vrax Prime presents the ultimate validation test for Imperial zealot doctrine. The fortress world's fall to heretical forces creates an impossible equation. Orbital bombardment would reclaim the planet, but destroy the sacred relics housed within its citadel. 10,000-year-old saints' bones outweigh tactical efficiency in Imperial mathematics. Strategic Planning Committee 847. Zeal faces the contradiction between military necessity and theological preservation. High Command authorizes faith-based attrition doctrine, accepting projected casualties of 12 to 15 million across multiple decades. The calculus is precise. Conventional forces require orbital support that destroys objectives. Zealot armies advance regardless of losses, their faith coefficients enabling sustained operations at 90% casualty rates. Human resources are renewable. Ancient relics are not. The mathematics favor expendable devotion over professional competence. Pre-deployment conditioning intensifies beyond standard parameters. Death Corps regiments receive enhanced indoctrination, emphasizing martyrdom as sacrament, their existing programming supplemented with Vrax-specific liturgies. Faith measures the distance between breath and duty, becomes synchronized to assault timing. Loyalty gradients are recalibrated. Units seeking survival transfer to rear echelons, while death seekers aggregate into assault formations. Munitorum logistics prepare for sustained high-casualty operations. Supply chains prioritize replacement uniforms over medical equipment, body bags over bandages. Sanctification protocols expedite blessed ammunition through diocesan checkpoints. Religious observance accelerating supply delivery. Stockpiles accumulate like devotional offerings. Shells, stretchers, grave markers, replacement troops. The ecclesiarchy frames 17 years of siege as pilgrimage, each trench a station of suffering, mass casualties as collective apotheosis. Theoretical zealot effectiveness calculations approach ultimate validation. Statistical models predict fanatic troops maintaining assault tempo, despite losses that would shatter conventional armies. Command reviews projections with clinical detachment, millions of deaths representing tactical advantage rather than human cost. Adept Vex processes deployment orders, her scholar conditioning enabling calculation of human logistics without emotional interference. Each manifest represents statistical probability. Shipping schedules coordinate with casualty projections. Replacement timelines sync with mortality curves. Soldiers become inventory. Regiments become consumables. Commissar Probator Thane reviews execution protocols for trench warfare, while Sister Novice Seraphina calibrates penance calculations for extended siege conditions. Their institutional training converges toward Vrax's crucible, where manufactured devotion meets 17 years of systematic attrition. Success validates decades of doctrinal development. Failure measures in millions. The campaign mathematics appear sound. The faith is genuine. The machine, properly fed, should grind through heretical stone. But theoretical models rarely survive. Contact with reality, weather, and human limits. How will 17 years of siege warfare test the limits of manufactured devotion? What hidden costs will emerge from this successful application of zealot doctrine? The siege of Vrax Prime unfolds as 17 years of systematic attrition, each year measured in meters gained and millions lost. Opening assault waves see deathcore regiments advancing into prepared kill zones while chanting the litany of the siege, their collective voice rising above artillery thunder in mechanical unison. 90% casualty rates register as acceptable operational parameters within faith-based attrition doctrine. Zealot conditioning enables sustained assault tempo, despite losses that would shatter conventional forces. Bodies accumulate in geometric progression, while the advance continues by meters, each trench purchased with company-strength casualties. Commissar Probator Thane enforces devotional compliance through ritualized terror, his bolt pistol never cooling during the opening months. When Captain Mordius hesitates before ordering his company across open ground, tactical prudence registering as heresy, Thane's summary execution restores unit cohesion mid-charge. The captain's death validates zealot doctrine more effectively than any sermon, his corpse becoming lesson in acceptable behavior under fire. Sister Novice Seraphina coordinates spiritual maintenance from forward aid stations, her voice cutting through screams and explosions to stabilize collapsing flanks through synchronized devotional recitation. During the Third Company's break, under sustained heavy bolter fire, she broadcasts the Canticle of Endurance across Vox networks, soldiers synchronizing their breathing to liturgical rhythm until panic transforms into renewed fanaticism. Sacred music becomes tactical asset. Faith becomes measurable force multiplier. The sanctification protocols proved decisive during the fourth siege of Hive Cluster Ferrograd. Adept Vex expedites blessed ammunition shipments through diocesan checkpoints, her ecclesiastical stamps bypassing standard customs delays that would cost crucial hours. While heretical forces maintain steady resupply through underground tunnels, Imperial logistics depend on religious observance to maintain ammunition flow. Vex's administrative theology saves 4 hours during critical resupply. Sanctified shells arrive as assault troops exhaust their magazines. Devotion literally keeping guns firing when secular logistics would fail. But systematic breakdown emerges after the 7th year as even zealot conditioning reaches psychological limits. Faith fatigue syndrome manifests across multiple regiments. Veterans exhibiting diminished response to hymnal cues, slowed compliance to penance orders, devotional speech intact but effect hollowed. They stand for prayer, recite the words, then fail to advance when whistles blow. Devotional decay follows in survivors who maintain ritual, observance while losing tactical effectiveness, their conditioned responses degrading through prolonged exposure to horror exceeding programming parameters. The Catechism from Chapter 3 undergoes systematic transformation through 17 years of attrition. Faith measures the distance between breath and duty, begins as battle cry shouted during assault waves, degrading by stages through rote recitation, mumbled between artillery barrages, finally becoming whispered prayer, uttered into mud for personal absolution rather than unit advance. Veterans who survive too many calendars keep the rites but lose the reflex. their zeal becoming hollow performance rather than operational asset. Replacement troops arrive with fresh conditioning but insufficient experience, creating tactical regression as veteran survivors cannot teach fighting, only dying properly. New regiments repeat earlier mistakes while maintaining devotional standards, zeal remaining constant as competence declines through systematic casualty replacement. The machine consumes its own institutional memory through personnel turnover, each wave less effective than its predecessor despite identical conditioning. The siege's final phase reveals the system's true mathematics. Assault troops advance through trenches built on loyalist bones, stepping over foundations of imperial dead to reach heretical citadels. Sacred relics are recovered from vaults whose floors consist of compressed remains, 14 million casualties purchasing victory, measured in recovered artifacts and reclaimed territory. Command reviews casualty abstracts with satisfaction, losses within projected parameters, faith coefficients validated, objectives achieved through acceptable resource expenditure. Vrax Prime falls after 17 years of systematic consumption. Victory parades march through streets paved with loyalist remains, while ecclesiarchy choirs sing hymns of triumph. The machine processes its success, cataloguing lessons learned and updating training syllabi. Zealot deployment doctrine receives blood-purchased validation. 14 million deaths become statistical achievement, human cost transformed into institutional success through administrative alchemy that measures victory in recovered relics rather than preserved lives. How does Imperial Command process 14 million deaths as strategic success? What institutional lessons emerge from the Vrax model of zealot deployment? The review boards convene in chambers that reek of parchment and machine oil, their walls lined with reliquaries containing fragments from 17 years of sacred consumption. Munitorum analysts spread casualty abstracts across tables, scarred by stylus marks and seal wax, while ecclesiarchy scribes prepare martyrdom rolls from identical data. The numbers tell two stories with one voice. Vrax Prime represents institutional triumph measured in acceptable human expenditure. Post-siege analysis reveals the primary contradiction that defines imperial military doctrine. The Vrax campaign succeeded, not despite its horrific casualties, but because of them. Conventional forces exhibit tactical unpredictability. Morale fluctuates with leadership quality, weather patterns, and accumulated grief. Professional soldiers retreat when losses exceed sustainable parameters, demand complex logistical support, and introduce variables that complicate strategic planning across decades-long operations. Zealot armies solve the predictability problem through systematic elimination of self-preservation instincts. Munitorum analysts calculate that fanatic units provide acceptable loss ratios unmatched by conventional forces, their faith coefficients enabling sustained advance regardless of casualties. The paradoxical efficiency emerges through statistical analysis. Zealot regiments achieve objectives with fewer resources per meter gained, despite higher overall casualty rates. They advance until physically incapable of movement, transforming battlefield chaos into manageable linear attrition. The hidden memorandum surfaces during operational review, without ceremony or surprise. Memorandum Hereticus 847. Zeal, long whispered in Munitorum corridors, appears fully archived and stamped. The document authorizes planetary governors to convert pilgrimage surplus populations into military assets through faith-based conscription quotas, providing political cover for demographic management disguised as religious devotion. Volatile urban populations become expendable assault troops. Economic refugees become martyrs. Political dissidents become heroes through systematic export of social instability. Adept Vex compiles the final casualty reports with mechanical precision, her scholar conditioning enabling transformation of statistical losses into spiritual victories through administrative alchemy. Her data slates track human cost, while her reports celebrate sacred achievement. Killed in action becomes achieved apotheosis. Missing presumed dead becomes translated to Emperor's service. 14 million deaths register as tactical success because measurement systems prioritize objectives achieved over resources expended. Commissar Probator Thane signs execution warrants that become commendations for posthumous valor through clerical processing. Sister Novice Seraphina writes beatification certificates for casualties she previously calculated as penance quotas. Their signatures face each other across ledger spines. Institutional balance achieved through complementary functions that transform consumption into production through interpretive frameworks. The institutional cannibalism becomes mathematically undeniable. The system designed to protect humanity systematically consumes the populations it claims to defend, creating sustainable attrition cycles that prevent dangerous social pressures from accumulating. Zealot production facilities process demographic volatility into military assets while removing potential dissidents and generating tactical advantages. Urban overcrowding, economic inequality, and political instability are solved through conscription that exports problems while importing victories. Resource management requires careful calculation. Governors balance conscription quotas against population replacement rates, ensuring sufficient breeding stock survives to maintain recruitment pipelines. The system feeds on its own output. War creates orphans. Orphans become zealots. Zealots create more war. Each cycle generates institutional momentum sufficient to sustain the next consumption phase through self-perpetuating mathematics. Yet soft warnings emerge within after-action recommendations few will read. Levy worlds show falling birth rates, while faith deserts expand where families have given beyond sustainable limits. Even predictable attrition depends on replenishment. The machine's appetite, sharpened by proven efficiency, assumes infinite supply from finite populations. If the system feeds on its own population, what happens when the supply dwindles? How have post-Vrax reforms refined the zealot production process? Post-Vrax institutional review does not mourn 14 million dead. It optimizes their expenditure. Faith-based attrition doctrine receives validation rather than revision, but its implementation undergoes systematic refinement based on observed limitations. The emergence of faith fatigue syndrome and devotional decay during extended siege operations triggers development of enhanced production protocols designed to address conditioning failure points identified through battlefield analysis. Sustainable fanaticism doctrine emerges as the primary institutional response, incorporating psychological maintenance cycles into standard zealot conditioning. New scholar progenium protocols extend devotional durability through staggered trauma application, controlled catharsis intervals, and reinforcement schedules calibrated for campaigns exceeding standard 10-year projections. The Catechism, Faith measures the distance between breath and duty, receives supplemental verses designed for prolonged recitation without psychological collapse. Breaking points are no longer avoided, but systematically reinforced through repetitive conditioning that builds tolerance rather than triggering failure. Technological augmentation transforms zealot production from craft process into industrial manufacturing. Mechanicus-approved neural conditioning implants, designated liturgical response arrays, trigger specific devotional behaviors when exposed to combat stimuli. Artillery impacts activate automatic prayer recitation. Enemy contact broadcasts hymnal frequencies through cranial vox units. Ammunition depletion generates litanies of martyrdom. Pheromone dispensers integrated into regimental standards amplify group religious experiences through biochemical manipulation, synthetic devotion, supplementing natural inspiration when individual conditioning proves insufficient. Psychochemical faith enhancers distributed through communion wine ensure consistent zeal levels, independent of battlefield conditions or accumulated trauma. Sacred rations contain sanctified stimulants that maintain devotional intensity during extended operations. The body becomes reliquary for imperial directives. The mind becomes cogitation engine locked to approved doctrine through biochemical reinforcement. The faith-industrial complex reveals itself as vast institutional networks spanning sectors and ministries, dedicated to producing, maintaining, and deploying weaponized devotion across galactic scales. Forge worlds manufacture neural implants alongside munitions. Agri-worlds cultivate psychoactive compounds for sacramental enhancement. Hive worlds process human resources through conditioning facilities that output zealots meeting standardized devotional specifications. Administratum bureaus coordinate levy schedules with scholar output quotas, while ecclesiarchy doctrine specialists license liturgical packages by operational theatre. Sanctification protocols expand beyond ammunition blessing to encompass entire supply chains. Neural implants receive sacred stamps that expedite shipping through diocesan checkpoints. Pheromone cartridges bear Aquila seals that classify them as religious artifacts rather than chemical weapons. The Imperium has industrialized salvation itself through assembly line processes that convert human suffering into tactical advantage via systematic spiritual engineering. Specialized zealot academies emerge to address diverse operational requirements identified through combat analysis. Anti-chaos purists undergo enhanced conditioning against ideological contamination, their neural pathways modified to trigger violent rejection of heretical concepts through implanted pain responses. Anti-tyrannid fanatics receive biomass resistance training, psychological conditioning, reinforced with chemical treatments that maintain human identity despite exposure to Xenos influence. Expendable shock cohorts are optimized for high attrition breaches through abbreviated conditioning cycles that prioritize immediate deployment over long-term durability. Manufacturing efficiency improves through systematic quality control measures adapted from munitions production. Batch sampling tests graduates for stress inoculation failures. Root cause analysis investigates company-level breakdowns. Faith coefficient calculations incorporate biochemical telemetry from implant monitoring systems. Loyalty gradients receive dynamic updates based on Vox traffic analysis and hymnal adherence metrics. Where prayer once ended, inspection checklists begin. Where absolution sounded, quality assurance signatures follow. Yet enhanced production techniques generate unintended consequences that threaten system sustainability. Devotional seizures spike during thermal stress when neural implants overheat beyond operational parameters. Hymnal dependency emerges as soldiers freeze when Vox chant signals fail. Their conditioned responses contingent on technological infrastructure. Black markets develop around faith enhancement supplies. Pheromone cartridges, stimulant ampules, and neural interface maintenance kits become currency in underground economies that corrupt the system through commodified salvation. Institutional conflicts intensify as competing imperial organizations dispute access to human resources required for zealot production. The Inquisition challenges Mechanicus patents on conditioning technology. The Navis nobility protests recruitment quotas that drain voidship crews. Astra Militarum commands compete with ecclesiarchy facilities for the same orphan populations. The faith industrial complex consumes resources faster than replacement systems can provide, creating scarcity pressures that force efficiency improvements beyond previous operational boundaries. What unintended consequences emerge from this industrialized devotion production? How do these systems interact with other imperial institutions seeking the same human resources? Administrative records from the post-Vrax period document what whispered rumors had long suggested. Cannibalization is no longer systemic accident, but encoded policy. Zealot production systems consume the very populations they claim to protect through mathematical processes that transform protection into predation. Scholar progenium facilities expand intake beyond battlefield orphans to include administrative orphans, children created by commissariat executions, ecclesiarchy purifications, and munitorum levy quotas. The machine ensures its own feedstock through systematic generation of the trauma it requires for conditioning. Demographic mathematics, the consumption equations. Heavy conscription worlds exhibit measurable demographic collapse as recruitment quotas exceed population replacement rates across multiple generations. Krieg produces deathcore regiments faster than families can produce children. creating mathematical inevitability disguised as devotional triumph. Cadia exports guard regiments while importing breeding populations from agricultural worlds to maintain recruitment capacity. Valhalla ships entire generation cohorts to off-world campaigns, leaving settlements populated by the elderly and medically unfit, their infrastructure maintained through imported labor and administratum subsidies. Birth registries become recruitment forecasts delayed by 20 standard years. Baptismal records serve as conscription schedules, each ceremony marking future military assets rather than celebrated lives. Planetary governors calculate sustainable extraction rates, the maximum percentage of each generation that can be conscripted without triggering complete social collapse within acceptable timeframes. Faith desert phenomenon. When conditioning exceeds capacity. Faith desert regions emerge where religious conditioning has become so intensive that normal human society cannot function outside military structures. Populations exposed to prolonged zealot production techniques lose capacity for independent decision-making, economic initiative, and social cooperation. Civilian infrastructure collapses when entire communities require commissariat oversight to maintain basic agricultural output, their conditioning so complete that they cannot perform tasks without liturgical instruction and devotional reinforcement. These regions become dependent on imperial support systems while providing diminishing returns for zealot recruitment. Populations conditioned beyond functional thresholds cannot produce effective soldiers despite perfect doctrinal compliance. Their conditioning eliminates the cognitive flexibility that enables tactical adaptation under combat stress. Zealot inflation, the economics of diminishing devotion. Recruitment efficiency declines systematically as populations develop psychological resistance to standard conditioning techniques. Each new zealot requires increasingly extreme conditioning as communities evolve cultural defenses against scholar recruitment and doctrinal programming. Early Death Corps regiments achieved acceptable faith coefficients through standard deprivation and indoctrination. Current production requires neural implants, chemical enhancement, and psychological conditioning that approaches the threshold of permanent cognitive damage. Zealot inflation emerges as the constant demand for more fanatical soldiers requires ever-escalating conditioning intensity to achieve identical devotional outputs. Munitorum cost analysis reports document exponential increases in resource expenditure per deployable fanatic. Conditioning time extends from 18 months to 4 years. Chemical enhancement costs triple. Neural implant failure rates increase as psychological limits are exceeded. Each generation of zealots costs more while providing diminishing tactical returns as conditioning techniques reach biological boundaries. Resistance networks, survival through false faith. Underground networks develop sophisticated methods for protecting children from scholar recruitment, operating not as organized rebellion, but as survival adaptation. Document forgery, identity concealment, and extraction operations emerge organically from communities facing demographic extinction. These networks, known by code names like quiet choirs and ash lines, specialize in hiding children in corpse haulers, the only transports that cross checkpoints without detailed inspection. False faith techniques evolve as behavioral conditioning that mimics zealot responses while preserving independent thought through compartmentalized psychology. Families teach children counter-breathing patterns that fool Auspex scanners, saline bladders implanted beneath skin to simulate chemical uptake, and hymnal recitation at approved pitch but altered cadence, passing, monitoring systems while maintaining unprogrammed cognition. These techniques represent evolutionary adaptation to institutional predation, human ingenuity preserving humanity beneath performance of compliance. Imperial escalation, institutional blindness and acceleration. The Imperium responds to resistance through systematic escalation of the techniques that created the resistance. Commissar Probato Thane oversees sector trials of preemptive purgation, liquidating suspected network hubs before recruitment drives commence. Sister Preceptor Seraphina issues circulars of corrective replacing parish confession with mandatory group shriving designed to break private resistance catechesis. Adept Vex's monitoring systems register declining efficiency across 3 subsectors: quota attainment technically achieved but requiring longer conditioning periods, higher training attrition, and increased maintenance loads for enhancement systems. Enhanced surveillance monitors for resistance indicators, while improved conditioning protocols counter false faith strategies. Expanded recruitment quotas compensate for declining efficiency through increased population pressure. Each countermeasure increases resource costs while generating additional resistance, creating arms races between institutional control and human adaptation that accelerates consumption cycles. Terminal trajectory, mathematical inevitability. Administrative reports document the acceleration through clinical language that obscures catastrophic implications. Population sustainability indices decline across recruitment sectors, while conditioning resistance factors increase exponentially. Faith production costs exceed projected budgets as devotional output quality shows systematic degradation. Faith coefficients, once reliable tactical multipliers, exhibit variance under stress that threatens operational predictability. The system cannot acknowledge shortage without admitting design failure, so it accelerates consumption to mask decline. Institutional momentum prevents recognition of terminal trajectory through bureaucratic structures that measure success via consumption rates rather than sustainability metrics. The machine designed to protect humanity systematically destroys the cognitive and social foundations that define human civilization. Consuming faster than populations can regenerate while escalating techniques beyond biological tolerance. The mathematics bend towards zero. The curve descends towards civilizational exhaustion, disguised as devotional triumph. How sustainable is this cycle of escalating control and growing resistance? What happens to imperial military doctrine when zealot production finally fails? Cold arithmetic replaces triumphal hymns in classified munitorum briefings. Statistical projections from 17 sectors reveal identical curves, recruitment efficiency declining, while resource costs per zealot increase exponentially. Faith coefficients, once reliable, tactical multipliers, exhibit variance under operational stress. Loyalty gradients drift downward, despite perfect doctrinal compliance. The gap between institutional demand and population capacity widens with each generation, creating mathematical inevitability disguised as administrative variance. Faith bankruptcy emerges as technical terminology for civilizational collapse measured in recruitment metrics. Entire sectors approach the threshold where populations can no longer produce effective zealots regardless of conditioning intensity. The Mordian Iron Guard homeworld exemplifies terminal trajectory. 3 centuries of intensive recruitment reducing planetary population below sustainable replacement, while conditioning techniques escalate beyond biological tolerance. Current zealot production requires chemical enhancement, causing permanent neurological damage in 60% of subjects, creating soldiers who maintain devotional responses but lose tactical adaptability. Adept Vex's quarterly reports document the slope with clinical precision. Cost per deployable zealot increased 37% sector-wide. Average operational durability declined from 6.1 to 4.4 standard years. Replacement lag exceeding warp scheduling by 2 full campaigns. Her subclauses read like statistical lamentations. Recommend temporary levy moratorium, pending demographic recovery. No signature above hers approves such heretical efficiency. The ultimate institutional contradiction crystallizes through operational analysis. Military success through zealot deployment creates dependency on diminishing resources while generating momentum that prevents acknowledgement of fundamental design flaws. Each victory validates doctrine that accelerates consumption, creating feedback loops where tactical triumph breeds strategic collapse. VRAC's model campaigns become templates despite evidence that such victories exhaust recruitment capacity faster than populations regenerate. Many Imperial commanders privately recognize the terminal mathematics. Commissar Probator Thane observes that disciplinary shootings now remove experienced personnel faster than enemy fire in 3 regiments under his oversight. Sister Preceptor Seraphina's devotional circulars grow longer, more imperative, compensating through liturgical intensity for declining recruitment quality. Both understand the arithmetic. Both continue implementation because alternatives require admitting post-heresy military doctrine was fundamentally flawed. Political structure prevents confession at institutional scale. Acknowledging zealot production failure means confronting 10 millennia of systematic human sacrifice disguised as necessity. The bureaucratic cost of admission exceeds organizational capacity for change, creating paralysis disguised as doctrinal purity. Reform becomes impossible through compartmentalized metrics. Munitorum celebrates increased throughput while ignoring output quality. Ecclesiarchy records perfect compliance while omitting effectiveness evaluations. Institutional momentum operates through physics rather than choice. The machine continues not because it functions effectively, but because stopping requires confronting the magnitude of civilizational cost already accumulated. The Creed provides language for endurance. It contains no grammar for confession at galactic scale. Memorandum, Hereticus 847. Zeal remains unrevised despite evidence of systematic failure, its implementation accelerating through bureaucratic inertia that mistakes consumption for production. The mathematics bend towards civilizational zero through processes too vast for individual intervention, yet too precise for accidental occurrence. The graphs lengthen towards statistical extinction, while the prayers thin towards silence. What will imperial military doctrine become when this system inevitably collapses? How do ordinary citizens survive within a civilization consuming itself? On Krieg's mustering fields, the air hangs thick with ozone and ash. Endless columns of death corps regiments move past rusting saints and floodlights, their collective voice rising in the guttural cadence of the litany of sacrifice. Behind portable barriers, Departamento Munitorum clerks hunch over data slates, tallying acceptable losses before deployment. The child's gas mask bears 21 purity seals now, 4 more confirmed kills since our first observation. The prayer beads click with mechanical precision through her breathing apparatus, each inhalation marking time and machinery that converts human potential into expendable devotion. We understand the function of this place now. This is not recruitment, but processing, not preparation, but consumption. The cycle continues not through institutional choice, but through structural inevitability. The Imperium has created mechanisms incapable of functioning any other way. The payoffs land with statistical precision. Sanctification protocols were always administrative shortcuts. Sacred stamps expediting supply chains through bureaucratic theology that mistakes efficiency for divinity. Nothing within blessed ammunition crates changes except shipping priority. Grace travels at express rates while secular munitions wait in customs queues. The hidden memorandum, Hereticus 847-Zeal, represents institutional cartelization disguised as religious doctrine, converting demographic management into sacred duty while providing legal framework for systematic cannibalism. The Catechism, faith measures the distance between breath and duty, was always death sentence taught as prayer, encoding mathematics of expendable human resources into devotional programming. Ordinary imperial citizens navigate daily existence while zealot production systems slowly consume their civilization around them. Most remain unaware that their children's indoctrination serves institutional survival rather than human protection. They attend mandatory devotions, submit to levy, quotas, and process grief through channels that transform mourning into recruitment for the next consumption cycle. The machine's genius lies in converting predation into protection through administrative language that obscures systematic civilizational cannibalism. Adept Vex processes another conscription cycle from her desk in Administratum Block Tertius, the same forms bearing different dates but identical quotas. Her stylus scratches across parchment while data slates calculate projected casualties for campaigns not yet declared. Transport schedules coordinate with mortality projections. Replacement timelines sync with demographic extraction rates. She stamps documents with Aquila seals that transform citizens into inventory, children into consumables, grief into tactical advantage. Across the complex, Commissar Probator Thane rehearses execution protocols while Sister Preceptor Seraphina signs beatification certificates in blank, to be completed when casualty reports return. The mathematics remain unchanged despite evidence of terminal trajectory. Faith coefficients decline while conditioning costs increase exponentially. Recruitment efficiency approaches zero while institutional demand accelerates through momentum that cannot acknowledge failure without confronting accumulated civilizational cost. Reform becomes impossible through structures designed to prevent the recognition that reform requires. The bleak recognition settles. The Imperium keeps creating fanatical armies, not because it chooses to, but because it has constructed institutional frameworks incapable of any alternative. The machine endures through consumption. Humanity endures through sacrifice. The cycle continues because stopping would require admitting that protection became predation, that the system systematically consumes the civilization it claims to defend. The child claims her mask from its peg. The prayer beads click 21 times. Her transport lifts toward another campaign, another validation of doctrine through expendable devotion. The machine continues. The mathematics remain precise.